Hello there, and welcome to another episode in the Georgia Workers' Compensation video series. My name is Jason Perkins, and I'm an attorney who specializes in handling Georgia workers' compensation cases. I created this series of videos to provide people with helpful information about Georgia's workers' compensation law and the benefits that they should receive under it. Today, we're going to talk about a concept that comes up in workers' compensation cases, and that's work restrictions. And specifically, we're going to address permanent work restrictions from a workers' compensation injury. Now, first, probably want to know, what are permanent work restrictions? Well, they're permanent as opposed to temporary. That means your doctor doesn't expect them to go away. They're generally given to you when you reach a point called maximum medical improvement. Your doctor may abbreviate that as MMI. That means that you've gotten as good as your doctor expects you to get. So if you have work restrictions, you've still got some limitations at that point. The doctor expects those work restrictions to be permanent. Generally, you may have something called a functional capacity evaluation, or FCE, around the same time to determine what those work restrictions are, or your doctor may just assign them on their own. And the doctor will also probably give you what's called a permanent partial disability, or PPD rating. So how do your work restrictions affect your workers' compensation case? The first thing to understand is that your employer may, if they're going to provide you with work, that work has to be suitable. That means it has to be within the work restrictions that the doctor's given you. But your employer doesn't necessarily have to provide you with work. If they choose not to provide you with work, then they're generally going to have to pay you workers' compensation benefits for not providing work for you. You're out of work as a result of your workers' compensation injury. And that means you generally should receive either temporary total disability or temporary partial disability benefits. Now, you just need to be aware that even though you'll receive these benefits when your employer is not providing you with work, that those benefits can end. There are limits on how long you can receive them in Georgia. The basic limits are that you can receive benefits for 300 up to 350 weeks when you're injured if they're temporary partial disability, or up to 400 weeks in most cases for temporary total disability. There are exceptions to those limits, but I'm not going to get into those here. Now, one question that may come to mind when you reach maximum medical improvement and get permanent work restrictions is whether you should settle your workers' compensation case. Generally, when you reach maximum medical improvement, it is a good time to consider settlement. And the reason why is because you have a lot more knowledge about your injury and how it's going to affect you in the future than you did when you first got hurt. You know what you're going to deal with in the future, and that's one of the main things that you need to understand when you're considering settlement. Because when you're considering settlement, you're really trying to predict the future a little bit. And this doesn't mean that you need to settle your case, just as it's often a good time to consider settlement of your case. Whether you settle your case or not is probably going to depend on how much money the workers' compensation insurance company is willing to offer you. Settlement is a very complicated process. The most important thing to understand about settlement is that it's final. So if you settle your case and that settlement's approved by a Georgia workers' compensation judge, you're almost never going to be able to go back and come and change that settlement. And that leads to what I think is one of the most important things to look at if you're going to consider settlement of your case, which I would definitely recommend you talk to a workers' compensation attorney before settling your case. It doesn't mean that you have to hire an attorney, just that you need to talk with one and discuss whether settlement is something good for you to consider, and what the potential positives and negatives of it are. After getting your questions answered, then you can decide whether it makes sense to hire an attorney to represent you, or whether you should even explore settlement of your case. I hope you found this information about permanent work restrictions associated with workers' compensation injuries helpful. If you have, please let me know that. The best way you can do that is by liking this video or giving it a thumbs up. If you have some questions about permanent work restrictions or anything else associated with a workers' compensation case, please reach out to me for a free consultation to get those questions answered. There's two easy ways you can set that consultation up. The first is by calling the phone number at the bottom of the screen. And the other is by visiting our website, which is www.perkinslawtalk.com, and clicking on and submitting the free consultation request form. I'd like to thank you again for watching this video today. I wish you the best of luck as you recover from your injuries.